Hey, welcome back to the next video where we're going to continue to build this character. In this video we're going to cover I think we're going to dive right into making the fish and then the rock base, and then just kind of further refine the details and get the print prepped and ready for the printer. So there's a lot to do in this video, so we'll jump right in. So coming into Zbrush here, this is kind of where we left off. There's just some anatomy issues that I'm going to fix real quick before we jump into making the fish, and so I'm going to use a snake hook brush. And he's still pretty jacked. I think I'm probably okay with some of that detail, but we'll probably try to subdue a little bit of that. Hitting Shift D to go to my lower subdivision levels, and then just kind of smoothing out some of the larger forms and those bulked out details. We're going to try to bring some of those in. I don't want him to look so buff, because that's not Gollum. He's kind of scrawny and skinny and emaciated. So we're going to try and bring some of these down a little bit. This muscle probably pulls too far back. It's just too big overall. It's always good to try to find a reference of a person that's in pose, or that's similar to the pose that you're going for, instead of just winging it like I'm doing right now. Smoothing. And going back to the Damien standard, carving that back in. And again, if you hold Shift and then let go of Shift while you're left clicking, it'll do a different smooth algorithm. I say again, I don't know if I've taught you that yet. Let's try to push these in a little bit more, because they tend to jut into the body a little bit as opposed to popping out this little area in the neck. Smoothing it back. Our topology is kind of weird. It's not working for us, but once we switch to Dynamesh mode, when we're totally solid on like posing the character and getting the pose where we want, we can just run a Dynamesh, and then this issue will kind of go away. Cool. Kind of just really getting obsessed with the shoulder area for some reason. Overall, I'm fairly happy with where things are at. So let's start making this fish. Okay, so solo mode. I'm gonna save my project. Go to Save As. Not sure if I covered this earlier. Sometimes the Save Next and Save buttons break, especially if you've been using Transpose Master. So switching over to Transpose Master will change the save paths for whatever reason. So Zbrush, I guess hopefully they're working through some things there. Card these guys in a little bit. I apologize if you can hear my kids freaking out. That's what kids do. It's early in the morning. They're getting ready for school. And we are not morning people in this house at all. Okay, it's looking better. Yeah, we get those little bones popping out a little bit better. And save again, and then let's go to append, and let's append a sphere. So what that's going to do is just bring in another sphere as a subtool, and we're going to change this sphere into a fish. So if I go over here to scale, you'll see our transform gizmo, and if it's like off over here, just make sure you recenter your pivot. And then in Y, we're going to scale down a little bit. And then as we snap to this axis, and I'm not sure if I covered this, but while you rotate, if you hold Shift, it'll snap to the different axis, nearest axis. So we're going to grab this red square and then squash that in X. And so we're getting kind of similar to like a fish shape. I'm going to bring it down, get out of the way so we can work on it. I'm going to scale this down a little bit, and then come over here to geometry, and we're going to jump right into Dynamesh. And you can see it's fairly low poly. So okay, so If I hit Shift F, you can see we've got this in Dynamesh. It's got that kind of weird topology. We'll switch to the snake hook brush. Make sure that our symmetry is on by hitting X. And then turn on Sculptors Pro mode for the time being and start pulling out like a fish's tail. Found a little tail here. And I've got some reference up of a catfish that I like on my other monitor. You can't see that, but it's got some interesting fin details. It's got some interesting coloration. It's got like this bright red rear fin and some cool like gray and white stripes. So I'm going to try to achieve that look. Maybe I'll include the reference or a link to the reference in the description. It's got this interesting bump on the top here. And the face kind of just comes down and flattens out. And the belly is fairly flat. So to re-Dynamesh, control left click and drag outside of your geometry and it's going to re-Dynamesh everything. And you can see I've turned off Sculptors Pro mode at this point. I'm going to up my resolution to, let's say, 400 something, 488 I guess, and then re-Dynamesh. And now we have more polygons that we can work with. So I think catfish typically kind of get flatter heads. So I'm going to try to go that route. And then using clay buildup, I'm going to carve in some eyes, hitting Shift F to turn off my polyframe, and just kind of pulling out some eyes. We'll probably go a little bit bigger. And then they have these interesting little tentacle type thing, like I call it a mustache, but we're going to try to achieve that by using come over here to the brushes and go to Curve Tube and scale our brush size, and the diameter of the brush is going to be the diameter of that tube as you pull it out of the geometry. So we'll come out right here and then drag one of those out. That's kind of cool. And you still have control over this. You can grab this circle here and move that around, and that'll move your entire object right where you want it to be. And then you can also grab here and kind of pull things around that way too, but that can be kind of dicey. And you'll notice that we have this dotted line here. That means we still have control over this. But once we click on our geometry anywhere outside of that mesh, left click, it'll go away. So now we're in full sculpt mode. We don't have that little temporary rig inside that geo anymore. I'm going to control left click to invert my selection, my mask, and just kind of make this a little bit wider. Bring the eye back a smidge. Using the Damien standard, I'm going to carve that detail in a little bit better. And then let's start to get, I think if I control left click, if I switch over to my snake hook brush, I can bring that up a little bit. It's more. Maybe they do they have them all over. They have them beneath and up above the mouth, below the mouth. But for now, I'm just going to keep this one below. In fact, let's add another one down here below the mouth. Say below the mouth, it doesn't exist yet. So, cool. Clicking out and make these ones a little bit smaller. Center the pivot. Rotate that guy. And I'm going to use Damien standard and carve in the mouth shape now. And I kind of want it to be open, just a little bit open. I'm going to re-Dynamesh. So now that we've officially connected our tentacles into the base topology. And I'm going to just continue to try to open this mouth a little bit. You know, he's out of the water, he's gasping, so he's about to get eaten by a goblin, gremlin creature that I think was formerly a hobbit. It's cool. Okay, so now let's go around, and I think they also have these kind of interesting little deals here that pop out. I think that's like their nose. At least I think the one that I'm looking at has something similar to that. So Cool. Okay, so now our fish is a little bit wide, kind of thick. So let's try to thin out these fins. I have the H polish brush as my active brush, and I'm going to make these fins come to a point here. Just the shape overall. And then I think that's looking good. I'm gonna bring this up to more of a point up here. This gets kind of flat. And then using my H polish, I'm gonna come in here and just continue to flatten out the top of the head. All right, so now we have a fin. We have several fins that we need to add to this guy. And the way that we're going to do that is holding Control, make sure that our mask pen is the active brush. Scale in our size a little bit. So I'm going to just hold Control, left click, and then I'm going to draw out where those fins are going to pop out right here. So there's one right there. There's going to be one underneath right here. And then, let's see, we got a few more. This one's gonna be smaller. Got a few more right here, kind of come at an angle. And then there is one up here behind those front gills. And then another one up top. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to do a mesh extract. So we'll come over here to Subtool, scroll all the way down to Extract, and just hit Extract and see what that does. Let's increase our thickness to like 0.1, and then really, let's drop it down a little bit more. 0.08, this is the one. Hit Accept, and what that's done is that's thrown into another subtool. And I kind of want that because I want to protect the shaping that I've done on my fish, so I'm going to turn off solo mode. So in order to get all the other subtools to turn off, you just hold Shift to turn them on, and then click it again, and it'll turn all of your other subtools off, holding Shift, and then turn on the ones that we want to be visible. So this is kind of a way around solo mode. You can get a couple of subtools visible and get all the rest hidden easily. So the tops of these are masked. We want to unmask those so we can work with them, and then we'll just start to shape these the way that we'd like. So I'm going to Dynamesh these. We'll scale up our resolution and continue to work on that. These guys kind of come to an interesting little roundish shape. So I'm using my snake hook brush and then my smooth to get those in place. And then these guys are kind of a similar shape. Their contact points with the body are kind of smaller, so try to get that. Maybe a little too big, something like that. And same with these guys. These guys are probably the most unique of all the shapes of the fins. So adjust the contact shapes, turn on solo mode, and see where we're at in here. Dynamesh. Using my Damien standard, I'm going to pull out some interesting little ridges on the ends of these guys. Okay. Just go all the way around those. Cool, and then redynameshing. Let's pull these guys up where they belong. Great. So now we're getting into a good spot. Obviously these are still too thick, so just before carving those we should have just used our H polish to thin those out a good amount. You obviously don't want them to be like paper thin because that's not going to print well. So continue to maintain some level of thickness for those if you can, so that they will print. A lot of the resin printers will print paper thin. So they're pretty awesome. But just to be safe, keep some thickness in those. We're not going to overanalyze it right now. I'm going to up my resolution to 7 something, and then so I've got those fitted out. I got to recarve our details. Now these fins are actually probably going to be hidden behind his hands, so we might want to try to rotate those down. So I'm going to mask those off and then use the original transpose tool by clicking this. When it's dark gray, that means that you're using the OG transpose tool. So let's draw out our pivots where we want those to rotate from, and then clicking the inner circle of that guy best we can. Try to get those down and out of the way, because like I said, we're probably not even going to see these once we get them into place. Scale those in, turn on the original or the new transpose tool. Okay, cool. All right, sweet. So the fish is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and merge our body into our fins by coming over here, making sure that it's right above those fins, hitting merge, and then control left clicking and dragging, control left clicking and dragging, and it's going to dynamesh that all together. So now you can see our topology is all connected. But before we do that, let's make sure we bump up our resolution to like 9 something, so we're retaining the details that we worked on. Cool. So now let's continue to model in some of the maybe some of the tendons that kind of go along the length of the fish. We're probably going to have to reintroduce a lot of this stuff once we get them posed and in place. Going to carve in these details in the rear fin. Smooth those back. I'm going to continue to widen his head a little bit too. Oh, I've never added gills either, so let's do that. And just using the snake hook, I'm just going to start to pull those out this way. I think those all kind of come down. Oops. Oh, I got these tentacle things in the way. Let's hide these. I'm going to choose my select lasso and holding Control plus Alt will make it a red color, and then those will go to the hidden layer. So continue to actually use the Damien standard, and then holding Alt, I'm going to carve out, and then carve in as well. So along that edge, I think these usually connect down here. It's been a while since I've been fishing. Okay, so we've got some nice gills. Dynamesh. Oh, because parts were hidden, it's not going to work. So unhide, and again, I just Control Shift and then left clicked, and that unhid everything that was hidden. Okay, so we've got some gills in there. And let's come in here with our Damien standard and carve in some fun little bits along those gills. and then smooth them back. Okay, I'm gonna hit save. And let's get this fish into place now. So come over here, if we hold shift and then left click on the eye a couple of times, it'll turn everything on for us. So now we're gonna come over here and recenter our pivot, unlock, and then reorient the pivot, and then relock. And I'm gonna turn off symmetry and then recenter again so it goes right to the center. Rotate this fish about 90 degrees. We'll say exactly 90 degrees. Obviously it's way too big, so grabbing this inner yellow square, we can scale the fish in and then just kind of place him into this guy's hands. Try a little small, one bigger. And then rotate this way. It's going to take some finagling to get him into place. So using our snake hook brush scaled way up, we're going to start to pose this fish in a way that we can just fit him into those hands. Bring the tail back. This tail a nice amount. Try to open this mouth a little bit more. Okay, cool. Alright, so we've got his fish. And we can always adjust his hands too, his fingers, his finger position, to make those work better. Right now, I think his hands look a little bit too relaxed to be holding a fish that weighs that much. It's a good sized fish, so we might have to adjust his hands. But for this tutorial, we have a lot to get through, so right now I'm just going to hit save. In fact, because I've moved into posing the fish, I think I'm going to make a new version. So we always have that fish that lives at the origin too, if we ever want to go back to that and work on him. So we'll change it to version 9 here. And then I'm going to append a cylinder for our base. If we go back to our concept, we can see that we've got these kind of jaggy rocks. And these rocks are supposed to be similar to what you see like those rocks over in Iceland. They're very weird, kind of like polygonal shapes that I was trying to, they're very rough in my concept. I tend to keep my concepts pretty rough. So there's some wiggle room here to kind of do what we want to do. We'll just start by making the rough shape. And as I make this, you can see there's the weighting, it might be a little bit off. Like if he was holding, his head is so big and his head is this way of his body. So if I just were to draw a square, he would probably fall forward, right? Because there's so much weight, including his big arms and the fish and his head. So we might want to just consider rotating everything back. And an easy way to do that is we can turn on transpose all selected subtools and then just mask our active subtool. So this subtool is the only one that's masked, but every single thing, every other subtool is going to be affected by this transpose now, as long as it's not masked. So make sure that everything's unmasked in your other subtools. And then if I click on this white circle and start to rotate, now he's looking like, okay, he's pulling on that fish and he's balanced a little bit better. So I always like to do that with my characters. I feel like even just that little subtle adjustment really helps things out a lot. His head is looking up a little bit more, but one thing I find with 3D prints is when they're printed small, you're typically looking down at them. And so it's actually fine that he's looking up that much, I think. I think it'll be okay. It's gonna be okay. So good, now we're just going to continue to work on this mask, or on this base. So hit solo. Obviously we don't want it to be a perfect cylinder. So let's come in here to geometry, and then we're gonna run not a Decimate, a Z remesh. Change it down to 1 and hit Z remesh and see what it does. Maybe even go lower, as low as you can, maybe 0.1. And now we're getting some kind of interesting polygonal looks, and it's even kind of twisted a little bit. So I guess we kind of like that. So we will now come over here to deformation and then taper, turn off X and Z and turn on Y. And we'll scale that up a little bit. Turning off all subtools, this can be a gotcha, so be careful with that one. Make sure that you're only scaling the active subtool. And everything else is out of visibility with solo mode, so it wouldn't be affected anyway, but just to be safe. So now we've got kind of an interesting rock here. And we want to create a bunch of these guys and just sort of scatter them around. So what we're going to do is holding control and then clicking this red arrow and dragging to the left. We'll make another rock. Kind of scoot that guy in. And then we'll do that again. You can actually hold the white arrows as well, holding control, scaling that in Y. Other one. So continue to build these guys. Okay, I don't like the size of this one on the left, so I'm going to come over here to polygroups, auto group, change that to the purple color. Control Shift left click on one of those points, mask. Control Shift left click outside to make visible. Control tap, and we will isolate just that guy and just kind of fix him. Using the snake hook to adjust the brush or the actual size a little. And then let's actually use our move topological brush to do the rest of that. So move topological. Just kind of taper things out and push things around a little bit, make them look a little more organic and interesting. Apologize if you hear my chair creaking around, it's kind of loud. Okay, so got this guy in here. Make sure that he's... We can always come back into his feet too. I'll left click on his feet and go into our snake hook brush and make sure symmetry is on and try to pull his feet down so they're more in contact with that rock surface. We're going to need that too for, you know, durability once we print. And then switching back to the rock, we'll just pop this guy up a little bit so we don't have to move his toes so much. Turn on solo mode, turn off solo mode. Just make sure everything's coming up into a nice contact there with the feet. Cool. Now, I think these are getting kind of interesting. So what we want to do now is add more detail to these rocks, and the way we're going to do that is just Control D to add some subdivision levels. In fact, let's do this instead. Let's come over here because we like some of these sharp ridges. Let's just do a Dynamesh right now as is, but we'll crank it to about 1,000 and see what that does. Okay, so now we are in Dynamesh mode. If we switch to H Polish, we can come around, crank our intensity all the way up, adjust our focal shift out a little bit, and just start like using our H Polish to kind of carve in some interesting looking details in these. It's almost going to look like carved glass or ice or something. I always find this part really satisfying. It's kind of therapeutic. Trying to just get rid of some of those polygons that we're seeing, but also maintaining some of these interesting ridges that we've got. I'm just pushing in at the time being. I haven't come out with it yet. Pop the details out. Okay, turn on solo mode so we can see this, isolate this guy. Cool. And let's say you just wanted to broadly accentuate all the details. There is a cool new slider. Just re-dynamesh there. If you go to deformation and come down here to contrast, you can just crank that contrast and it'll pop out those details. And you're going to find yourself doing that a lot when you're getting into 3D printing in ZBrush, because sometimes those details just don't show up at scale when they're really printed really small. So you have to push those, crank those details to the point where they look kind of crazy, and then they're going to show up and look awesome in the print. So just be aware of that. That new slider was just introduced not too long ago in ZBrush, and it's awesome. It is a freaking game changer. But just remember, it does a broad adjustment. So re-dynameshing, and these rocks are looking pretty cool, I think. So obviously I want them to be flat at the bottom, so what we're going to do is first things we're going to save. Sometimes running this function will crash ZBrush. So with this as the active subtool, we're going to come over here and hit Control-Shift, and it's going to bring up our select tools, and we'll switch over to the knife curve brush, and then we're going to left click and drag along the base, and it's going to slice that perfectly flat for us. And the reason I say beforehand is because this tool is a frequent crasher of ZBrush, so be very careful with this tool. Whoops, move higher, there we go. So now we're perfectly flat underneath. It's cool because it actually adds that to a different poly group as well. So it's pretty cool. All right, another cool brush that I like to use, I think it's called Crumble. Oops, I hit X. So brushes, Crumble, yeah, Crumble brush. So scale this up and just start to kind of like wiggle back and forth with the mouse cursor, and it'll add some kind of interesting little details. And if you're being, real nitpicky, it's not the best brush, but if you're just kind of doing broad strokes, that was too crazy. Sometimes when you hit it at the wrong angle, it breaks everything, so just be careful with that. Cool. Yes, this is looking definitely more like jagged. I don't know if I like the up and downs as much. Well, maybe I do. Yeah. Just remember, this can be a dangerous brush. If you're hitting it at the wrong angle, you can get weird stuff like that, but in this case I think it looks kind of cool. We'll leave it. Crumble brush is what that's called. And then come back in with H polish and maybe just carve back some of those details. Flatten stuff out a little bit. Awesome. Okay, turn off solo mode. So this is what we're looking like. Let's be sure to save. Let's version up, hit save next. And maybe we want, this is cool as is, but maybe we want to have a little tiny base underneath that. So we'll go to append and then go to cylinder, and then we'll append a cylinder and then get that guy into place. Flatten that out in Y. And one thing I like to do is recenter everything. So I'm going to mask this cylinder like we did before, and then turn on Affect All Subtools, and then scoot everything kind of more to the center. And the reason I do that is because if you want to do any kind of radial symmetry work on this little cylinder, that's still going to be centered at the origin, which is good. So I just hit Control D to subdivide that 4 times, delete lower, come back to deformation, and then I'm going to run like an inflate to kind of round that edge a little bit more. And I'm going to scale, turning off all subtools, scale that down. I don't want it to overpower the piece. I always have a hard time, honestly, coming up with bases that I like. And right now I'm not sold on this totally, but one thing you could try to do too is do a taper in Y direction. Kind of taper that guy in and then scale it out. Make sure your pivot is centered. Yeah, it's looking a little bit better, I guess. Let's flatten the bottom with our fancy, in this case I'm going to use the Clip Curve brush, which does kind of the similar thing, only kind of just pushes and squashes all the geo up. It's just a little bit of a safer brush that doesn't crash as much. Go over here to draw mode, change it to 24 so we get a little more perspective on our character. This guy's looking pretty cool. So we hit save, and let's see, what else do we want to do here? We talked about kind of coming in and refining. Maybe we should actually commit and move into Dynamesh phase for this guy. That sounds crazy. I'm going to adjust his loincloth a little bit so it's hanging a little bit better. Yeah, so maybe that's what we'll do. Let's refine his loincloth a little. Using the clay buildup brush with symmetry turned off, because we don't like symmetrical looking details in everything. And we're just going to kind of pull some details in here. Make it look like it's hanging fabric, smooth it all back. I'm going to come back here, make sure Dynamesh is on, re-Dynamesh this guy. Using the Damien standard brush now at this point. Just going to add some tight little wrinkles around the waist area. Maybe pushing it a little bit too far, but smooth it back. And cool. All right, so let's hit save, and then let's check out our reference and see how we're doing. So he's definitely a little bit more hunched. Proportionally, he might be a little more stylized in my concept art. I think maybe his head could be a good amount bigger. And I think that even though he's looking up a little bit too much, I think still. So let's do this. Let's pull this all back into Transpose Master and make some adjustments there. So come back to our Z plugins, come down to Transpose Master, go to T-Pose Mesh, and we'll pull everything over and make a few more adjustments. And then guess what? We're going to commit to Dynamesh on the body and go from there. So let's just mask his neck area and his head, his hair. Blur that mask by left-clicking, Control left-clicking several times on the geo. And let's move our pivot into place. Make sure that symmetry is on. Double check your symmetry. And then reset your pivot, relock. And then let's scale up the head just a little. And maybe pop it out just a little bit more. Yeah, it's looking a little bit better. And then Alt-Tab over to our concept. Take a look at that. So he's more hunched, so let's try to achieve that a little bit. Using the snake hook brush, let's add some hunch to this guy. And a little bit of mass to those thighs. The other thing I think we should do is let's angle his head down. So again, we'll reselect right here using the lasso brush, invert our selection, and then let's rotate down just a little. And we do have to get him in pose a little bit more by, so if we look at our concept, his head's kind of tilted to the side. He's looking towards camera. And so and one of his legs is drooped down a little bit more. So, and then he might be hunching this direction a little bit too. So he might be kind of going like this direction. So let's go for it. Let's commit to that at this point. So we'll undo and just come back to where we had our head. And then let's try to get him, turn off symmetry. And make sure you're grabbing that inner green circle there. And then the blue circle, maybe cock that head to the side a little bit more. Blur our mask, use that red arrow to pull to the side. Yeah, it's looking better. Control, clear your mask. And using the snake hook again, because that mouth bag is getting in the way once again. Pull that back up and out of the way. Let's get this neck in place a little bit better. His necks don't do that. Just kind of straighten that out a little bit. Okay, cool. Cool. And what else did we decide? Let's take a look. His knee was bending down a little bit more, so using the move topological brush, I'm going to pull that knee down just a little bit. Just a little bit more. And just come around to this side, make sure things are looking okay over here. Scaling up and coming down. Cool. Cool. Oops. Okay. Yeah, I think this guy's looking better. Let's turn on our symmetry because we're still, this part of the body is still in symmetry. So let's smooth out some of these shoulder muscles a little bit, make them less cramped. Pectoralis muscles in a little bit. Kind of dig that he's got a little bit of a belly, a little pooch going on here. And I think we're getting pretty close to achieving our concept, so let's pull this guy back even more so. Rotate, give it a good rotate here. Take a look. Rotation. Yeah. Let's go to our move topological brush and bring our bicep crease down just a little bit. Your upper arm and your lower arm are usually about the same, very similar distance, or in length, different size. So you don't want to have your upper arm be much shorter than your forearm, which is what we got right now, and that's okay. I mean, we're going for stylized, so it's not a huge deal. You kind of get away with a lot when you're stylizing a character and making it your own. So I think we've got like a sense of weight now, that this fish has some weight to it. I think we've achieved that. Let's go back. Okay, cool. So now the fun part. Let's switch back to our other subtool. Come over here to Z plugin, go to T-pose, and that's going to adjust everything, move all of our adjustments, propagate those to the subtools in our other one, and we're good to go here. So it's cool. And now he's kind of like pulling back on that fish to get him up out of the water, and he's looking at an angle. His back muscle still might be a little bit janky. Pull these guys out a little. Okay, and maybe add a little bit of some folds right here. Okay, so we're getting a little long in the video. So maybe what we'll do in the next video is we'll go ahead. This is looking weird. Let's fix this. Push these guys in to kind of accentuate the triceps a little bit. Better. Shoulder area is kicking my butt, man. Okay. So Come back in here with the Damien standard and carve these guys back in. Just a little. All right, awesome. So we got a weird deformation here with this knee when we transposed it. So let's try and get our shape back a little bit better. Using the Damien standard. All right, so we're gonna hit save here. Oops. Now because we played with Transpose Master, that save function is broken. So go to save as, and then make sure you go to your original file path, and then probably version up. You'll notice that I like to version up. It's a good habit to get into, so you can always secure the state of things as they were. Yeah, overall, I'm getting pretty happy with this guy. This fish's tentacles are going inside of this thing. Let's inflate the eye out a little bit too, so we can do our inflate brush. Make those a little bit bigger. Let's pop those guys out. So yeah, you'll notice like on this fish, symmetry obviously doesn't work anymore because we've got this posed. So it's not going to work across that x-axis anymore. Let's carve in some of the details a little bit better on the fish now that we can see what we can see. Turn on solo mode to help with the weird edging issues. So just accentuate those almost to the point where they look too much. Can't stress that one enough. Pushing them. I mean, you really could get crazy with it. You could go in and you could make like a scale brush, and you could get all these little scales kind of popping out of this guy. I'm ready to get him printed, so I'm not going to get that crazy with it. Turn on solo, off solo. These guys still look a little bit weird right here. Damien standard, clean these up. Here we go. I'm going to re-dynamesh this guy too. Actually, I'm going to increase my resolution to like 1500, 1400, and then re-dynamesh. So, cool, okay. Let's take a look here. Save. Now that we've already fixed our save path, now these buttons should work fine. I hope they get that taken care of soon. If you want to see this character with some like simple shadows, you can come over here and click this BPR button. If you click that, it'll do some very simple lighting, so you can get kind of an idea of what that's going to look like with shadows. One thing you can do right now, the shadows are super sharp, so if you want to see some softer shadows or adjust the opacity, the transparency of those, you can come over here to your render, go to BPR shadow, and then you can adjust your angle to something like 15 or 17 or whatever, and increase your strength a little bit, and then hit that button again, and it'll adjust the sharpness of those shadows. Kind of cool how his eyes are catching those shadows. I like that. Yeah, that means that we've achieved that eyebrow, that really interesting sharpness in the eyebrows. It's always good to hit render and see potentially what that's going to look like in lighting. One thing I didn't mention there is I adjusted my ray amount, and that fixes your shadow ray issues that you see there. So I'm going to alt left click on this guy and adjust his knee a little bit. So you can see, because symmetry is off, you see my point over there is kind of floating off in space because it doesn't work. You can do something fun called, you can activate posable symmetry if you've done it right. Let's see if we can actually get that to work. So let's go to our lowest subdivision level, turn on symmetry, and you can see that point over there is off. Come up here to, I think it's transform, activate symmetry, use posable symmetry. And that way, if you come over here now, because the topology in your character is perfectly symmetrical, it now works fine. So you can still kind of adjust both sides of the character. That's one of the huge benefits of using a clean topology while you work. But in this case, we don't really need to. I feel like we're in a good spot. I think what I might do is wrap this video up. In the next video, I'll continue to come in and just think through the detailing. Maybe we will go through and add some scale detail on this fish or something, accentuate the details in the rocks, and then get this character shelled for 3D printing. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know how my teaching is. Am I going too fast, or am I too inarticulate? Do I need to learn proper English? Do I need to wear deodorant? I mean, just simple things, you know, just give me some tips and let me know how I can become a better teacher and make these videos better for you. And be sure to hit the notification bell when I drop new videos. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.